Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another MSP Cyber Roundtable. We're joined today by Melanie Padron. Did I get that right?
Padron.
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 I put a little Spanish on there, and then maybe I shouldn't have, though you are in Texas, so maybe that's right.
Yeah.
She's joining us today for an awesome conversation about cyber insurance as it relates to small businesses and MSPs, which is a space that we are, there's a special place in our hearts for it, for sure. So we're excited for the conversation today. Welcome, everybody. Melanie, why don't you take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background, and then I might throw a couple of questions at you.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I'm the business development manager at IT ArchiTeks, and we're just an MSP with a security-first mindset. We focus heavily on cybersecurity. My background is actually in property and casualty insurance, though. I spent 25 years in that industry, starting all the way from a secretary, and yes, they called us secretaries back then, moved into a little bit of inside sales, outside sales, marketed property and casualty insurance products to independent agents throughout Central Texas. Just that I left that company and then went to work for a third-party administrator that provided business process outsourcing solutions to the insurance industry. And that's where I stayed until I joined cyber. And when you think about it, insurance and cybersecurity have a lot in common. There's a lot of parallels. It's all about understanding and managing risk. And one is on the reactive side, and now I'm on the proactive side. And it feels really good just to be on this side of things.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to ask you a couple of really hard questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite dessert?
Oh, I am not a sweets girl. Can I just have a piece of pizza or some more French fries?
I can definitely ask you pizza questions.
Usually we ask about pizza.
It was coming. What's your favorite pizza topping, and where's the best place around you to order from?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of great pizza here in Texas. I like a good white pizza with cheese. If I had to pick like a tomatoey pizza, I'm going to get really controversial here, and I would go with Hawaiian.
Okay, I like that. I like a little controversy.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, do you have anything you wanna throw out there? How was the week?
Well, I don't think Hawaiian pizzas are controversial. They're amazing.
Yes, they are.
So, Melanie, you may or may not know and or remember this already, but I worked in the pizza world for a little bit, and there were nights where I would be alone in a pizza restaurant, and I would whip up a little something that wasn't on a menu, and I would throw just a few pineapples in under some of the other toppings, because every once in a while that like burst of sweet, it's like, I don't know, it's neat, especially if you throw a jalapeno next to it.
Oh, I like that. Yes,
Me too. Well, Matt, on the back of jalapenos and pineapples, do you want to dive into some governing in NIST?
Yeah, I mean, and on the week it's been pretty crazy in tech world. We had this, particularly in the MSP space, right? We had some vulnerabilities. We got crazy things happening with the cell phone networks. I won't speculate too much in this box here, but yeah, it's been a long week. But yeah, we're gonna jump into NIST governance, and with that, let me cue up the video here. So we've been covering the new NIST CSF 2.0 draft. It's been a bunch of years. It's been a long decade, let's put it, that has not seen updates to NIST CSF, which is used a lot by municipal governments, state governments, and anyone that does business with them. So very popular in the small business sector, up into medium and large enterprise.
Topical.
Yeah, it is topical today, and it's one of the focuses of NIST CSF was to create a, as complicated as cybersecurity is, to create a common frame of reference that allows people to communicate from different perspectives. So the cyber insurers can talk about this cyber risk thing, but so can the small businesses, so can the regulators, so can like the security wizards, right? The auditors, everyone gets to talk about the same things. And so NIST CSF 2.0, unlike some other frameworks that are, very specific for internal security process, this was always meant as a language to be shared among those multiple audiences. So it's a little bit simpler. It's about on the same complexity as CIS, which we love to recommend to MSPs. And today we're going over this governance function. So this is new to NIST CSF. They previously scattered governance in the other 5 functions, but now we have the 6th function, governance.
Can I
Go
ask
ahead.
you a layman question?
Yeah, please.
What the hell do you mean by governance?
Oh, good question. So I'm a member of a local government, and we have a little school board action, and we come up with policies and plans, and we have oversight on accounting. And in that same way, the governance of cybersecurity requires coming up with a cybersecurity plan, and then overseeing that it actually gets implemented, enforced, making sure it's resourced effectively, and that's what the governance should do. But on cybersecurity has very specific needs, and we'll go through those right now. So the first category here in the govern function is organizational context. So before you can create a governance system, you need to understand, well, what makes my organization different than other organizations. Like in my school board, our governance processes look way different than they do down in DC, in the halls of Congress, right? Different needs. So to establish that cybersecurity program, you really need to understand, well, what does this organization do? If it failed, who would it impact? Are there laws involved? Are there contractual requirements with clients or vendors? Management needs to think about what the goal is. To be secure is not enough. Management needs to decide, well, we only care if we're up, right? Because maybe we don't think we have any confidential data. Or maybe they decide, well, we need to make sure we're up and we need to protect confidential data. Or they may decide, well, we definitely need to protect confidential data, but no big deal if our systems are down for a few days, right, or a week. Those are the types of things that management needs to understand, so they can give instructions to their cyber team. And they're going to dig into things like, well, would a failure here impact human safety, right? Because if there's a human's health involved, or a human's safety and being a human involved, you'll want to dig in to make sure they're protected, right? So that's all like it's a loose conversation that should happen at the top of the organization. After you figured that out, including what are we going to protect? Maybe there's different parts of the organization you're going to protect more or less, or maybe you're really 2 companies that work together and you're going to protect one side of the company a little bit different than the other side of the company, right? You then need to work into, create a strategy around that and understand, well, exactly how are we going to prioritize the needs of cybersecurity along with all of the other needs of the business. Is accomplishing those goals that we talked about in setting the organizational context, is that more important or less important than other business activities? And if like in most organizations, there's a balance to be had, right? That's just about right. So, you want to decide as an organization, well, we want to protect, but we also don't want to spend too much, or we want to protect, but we still want to be able to move fast. And so you need to set a risk tolerance that allows you to move exactly as fast or as at the lowest cost possible while still achieving some part of your goals. And so that's strategic. And then those things set the tone for these other functions. But before I move into them, does that all sound familiar? Are these concepts that sound like they're new to either of you?
I mean, managing risk in an organization. No, I think maybe the way it's framed. So when I owned a business, or when I owned a different business, I was focused on each individual element of my business, and was managing the risk there, at the moment in time with the business, as opposed to zoomed out thinking about my high level risk strategy. But I was a small business. I had at the least 30 employees and at the most 75 to 80. And each individual business unit I focused on and I identified where the risk was in the moment. I didn't think about it at the highest level. From organizational context perspective, I was responsible for most of what needed to happen and what needed to be communicated. So
I think in small businesses, that's super common, right? Small businesses are focused on tactical things that are going wrong this week or they expect to be going wrong next week, right? Unfortunately, cybersecurity is one of those things where if you're going to put in place the things to protect you over, a longer period of time, you really need to take what's called an enterprise risk management framework and look at the whole organization, perform long-term planning. Unfortunately, even small businesses have to do a little bit of that for cyber because, frankly, there's no like magic wands in cyber. You can't snap your fingers and just wave a cyber wand. You have to plan, and you don't want to invest in the wrong place. So, anyway, that's those first couple categories. As we move into like a little bit deeper, more detailed governance, I think that the supply chain risk has got a lot of attention the last few years. Originally, when we were thinking about supply chain risk, say a decade ago, the biggest worry at that time was could someone intercept this physical device while it was moving around the world before it got to its end state. But now that we're all running in the cloud and we're running on code that's updated dynamically in open source products, we've got for every business application, we've got this supply chain of software that starts in our organization, goes out to our business app vendors, and they've got a whole chain behind them. So having some visibility into that and how that whole chain of organizations manage their cyber risk, really, it's important. It's important from the perspective of selecting the right vendors and trusting them the right amount. And then, you can do things like insure against risks if there's nothing else you can do. Couple more categories here. After you've handled that, setting the tone of risk tolerance, understanding the organization's priorities. Hopefully, you've done your supply chain analysis, roles and responsibilities. Who does what in the security program, right? Who's responsible for finding things that need to be secured? Who's responsible for implementing the actual security? Who's responsible for looking over their shoulders on occasion, or maybe regularly, to make sure things stay secure, right? Policies and procedures. How do we keep everyone in the organization on the same page on what the security outcome should be? As an example, you should set a password on your phone, right? And you can have a password policy about that. You should have a password on your desktop, so when you walk away from it, you can see everything you need to see. When you walk back to it, rather, things stay safe. Oversight, and again, who's really responsible, who's ultimately accountable for all these things that we just went over. Ideally, it goes up to the CEO and the board, and they have a discussion about all this stuff. So that's it for the govern module. There's a lot that goes into making that happen, but on its surface, it's understand who you are as an organization, set your priorities, understand your risk acceptance thresholds, have some high-level policies on how you want to treat security in your organization, and make sure people are accountable for staying that way.
I'd love to just say something like at a high level related to this as we transition. Govern to me feels like let me figure out how I want to say this, or rather, let me say it differently. You can't have govern in your business just for this. And that might be, you may be like, oh, Zach, I disagree, and we may have a fun little debate here. But I think if you don't have govern as like like a normal part of your business where you're like, somebody checks the applications, somebody does this regularly, some like everybody knows where they're supposed to be when, and everybody has very clear responsibilities. If you don't have general governing processes as a part of your business, and I know there are many MSPs out there that are 1, 2, 3, or 4 person shops that don't have that. If you don't have that as a part of your organization, this govern thing that's related to cybersecurity, like it's not going to do what it needs to do for cybersecurity because your governing maturity for things in your business just isn't high enough. So on my side, like the business focused side, I want to like throw this out there. Anybody that listened to us talk about governing and didn't think like, oh, I should just be doing all of those things for every piece of my business all the time. Like I should be considering risk here. I should be having a process. I should be ensuring somebody has responsibility. Like if you're not doing those things just generally, and then you're going to all of a sudden try to do them regularly and specifically to something like security, it probably isn't happening. My money's not on you
No,
in that moment.
you're absolutely right. And for service providers, it's even a little more complicated because service providers operate in what's called a shared responsibility model. So service providers bring their security and their governance to the table. The client brings their security and their governance to the table. Now, actually, the responsibilities, and some people actually create matrices. Sometimes it's right in the contract. The
They
service
may
provider has a different list of responsibilities than the client, right? But to have that whole security, you need all of the things, and so you each have responsibilities. And so as a service provider, if your client has really strong governance and you're coming to the table and you're just bringing the technical skills, right? You may be missing part of the equation, and the client may only ever get to 3/4 security, right? At best case scenario, right?
I want to throw a question at Melanie as we transition into cyber insurance and her expertise because she's very comfortable with with business processes, with cyber insurance, with people, with organizations running very smoothly. So I want to throw this at you. Do you think that a business can have a high level of maturity from a security perspective with medium to low level maturity in an operational maturity perspective? What are your thoughts?
No, I don't. I think that just things have changed so much that we're just trying to keep up right now. We know that cyber attacks are way up, and everyone's struggling to keep up right now with how fast things are changing. Whether you're an insurance company trying to craft a policy around that to help reactively, or whether you're the insurance agent, maybe you're a general lines agent and you want to get into cyber liability. It's really, unless you're a specialist in that specific line of business, it's really hard to keep up with how fast things are changing. And don't even get started on the business owners. The business owners, who are wearing so many different hats, as they're just looking for guidance. They're looking for the MSP to come alongside them and help guide them and educate them, or they're looking for their insurance agent to help them understand what the coverages are and what they're responsible for retaining or what their deductibles are. It's just, I think it's a opportune time for everyone to come together and really attack the issues.
I think we agree with that completely. Matt, do you want to give a little framing on some of the cyber insurance space, and then we'll ask Melanie on some specifics on the different
Yeah,
perspectives.
I'm happy to do a little bit. It's interesting. We've asked that question with many of our insurance partners, and people paint pictures from different angles, right? So I'm just going to give you like one of those, but it's all the same picture, right? Um, there's different insurance products out there. They get pushed by carriers. Down into in the U.S., we have brokers and then agents that actually are licensed to bring these into end organizations, right? And there's a bit of a negotiation between the end customer and the brokerage or the agent on what coverage they should be getting, and sometimes it's based on what what risk they're trying to manage. But the reality is they may be uninsurable, or they may be minimally insurable, because out in the insurance market, um, much of which is in London in the Lloyd's insurance market, they're making decisions about, hey, look, all the insurance that we're underwriting on the planet, which is then, they're taking the risk from the carriers, who are then taking the risk from the brokerage, who are taking it from the small businesses, right? It's one insurance market, right? They're just, on a random Tuesday saying, guys, the world's more dangerous. Now the requirement's here. And as a small business, you just need to be reactive to that. Like, the reality is people are going through policy renewals, and every year they're getting surprises, right? And different types of businesses. And
Melanie, tell us a little bit, because you spent a lot of time in that intimately with cyber insurance. Tell us about what it looks like from the side you're familiar with.
Well, I would say that, the environment has everyone confused. Okay, so you have insurance companies trying to keep up with how fast the risk is changing. And, they're asking the questions, what do we need to ask? And what do we need to evaluate to make sure that this business is doing the right thing? And most small businesses don't have cyber liability insurance. If they do, I consider them incredibly mature. Now, larger businesses, that's a little bit different, but most small businesses don't have it. I think it's somewhere around 17%. So, you have the insurance companies trying to make sure that the business is doing the right thing. And to your point, Matt, if you don't have security in place, you're probably not insurable. You probably don't qualify for coverage. The good news is that you do. If you have cyber security in place, then you probably do qualify for coverage. It might be better coverage. It might have lower premiums. It might have lower deductibles. And so cybersecurity and cyber insurance really work hand in hand, like almost like two pieces of a protection puzzle that offer that business the most comprehensive coverage. I heard someone call it the 1-2 punch the other day, and I think that's right. I love sports, obviously, with everything behind me. But cyber liability and cybersecurity really are that 1-2 punch that the business owner needs to keep their business safe in today's landscape.
yeah, and there's a lot of confusion around how much insurance they really need. I think some people that haven't felt an incident that affected them personally, like it hasn't been close enough to home for them to understand, right? They try to think about, well, how much insurance do I need, right? And it's hard, we've
I
got
remember
commercial,
thinking,
general lot.
forgive me for cutting you off, but I remember thinking that with just general insurance for like my building, like business owners are making decisions on all sorts of different types of insurance in these different scenarios. It's hard, and you were about to talk about the different
Well,
types. So
I
please
read
pick
one
up
the
it
other
there.
day. I was looking at a new insurance product I'd never purchased before. It's really far away from what we do as a business, and I'm just trying to understand the coverages, and I'm just like, I'm totally ill-equipped, and that's how and to make it harder, and I think this has made it harder. There's commercial general liability policies these days which come with $25,000 or $50,000 of like coverage, and it says cyber on the line, but there's tons of exclusions. And the reality is, you can be destroyed. You can be destroyed, and 50,000 won't even go. It'll be a drop in the bucket, right? And
And you'll be responsible for having not understood what you purchased. You'll think, oh,
yeah,
well, this is what I actually. Well, anyway, Melanie, it looks like you were going to
I've
pick.
seen these warranties coming out too, where they like warranty each machine for like $2,000, and people are like, "Oh, that machine only costs $2,000. I could see that needs a $2,000 warranty, but you could have $1 million of data on that machine, right?"
I think
So
it's super important that when we talk about this, that we clarify that addendums, endorsements, and warranties are not the same thing as a cyber liability policy. And you really do. You made a great point. You really do need a cyber liability expert. I love independent agents. That's where I grew up. But general lines agents, your best friend who opened an insurance agency, the guy from high school that you went to school with, he's probably not the best one to help you understand the specificities of a cyber liability policy. You really need to understand your coverages. You need to understand your deductibles and anything that you're retaining. you really need to understand what the special sublimits are, because these policies are very different, and the coverages and the way they're set up. A business owner needs to understand what they're retaining if they do have a loss.
I'm embarrassed that I've owned businesses and I don't even know what the hell a sublimit is. So if anybody else is confused watching, then hopefully that makes you feel better.
Well, you can have $1 million policy with $1 million limit, but your sub limit for ransomware is your total payout is going to be $250,000. And you can have, $1 million limit of liability, but any of the breach response coverages, your privacy notification, cyber extortion, data restoration, they have they can easily have a $10,000 retention on them. So as a business owner, you need to know what you're retaining. Insurance is risk transfer at its simplest, but when you think about cyber and the retentions and the deductibles, it's more like risk sharing, because it's not you're transferring it and you have no risk. Right. You're transferring it and you have a lower risk.
I'd love to throw a question at you, and both of you. Actually, I think this is an interesting question for both of you. So in other risk transfer situations, like a fire, and I love to go to that one. Like, let's say my Domino's burns down. I have elements of insurance that are baked in, like, well, downtime and the building and this, and you can be more or less restored to whole, or in many situations, more than whole, or sometimes less than whole to those unfortunate ones that it doesn't pan out for. This appears different. Whereas if my business has a serious attack and I lose tremendous goodwill that can't necessarily be restored, I'd love to just hear you guys. I haven't posed exactly a question, but I'd love to hear both of your opinions on maybe why it's so different and how we might remedy that.
I've got a related comment. If you have a cybersecurity program in place that is monitoring when an incident happens, and you bring that incident early to your cyber insurer, and your cyber insurer brings the incident responder to you early, fast, quickly, and you use that team and your internal team to communicate effectively to your stakeholders, most of that type of loss can be remediated. It's really poor handling of an incident that leads to issues, right? It's not we had an incident. It's we had an incident and we did a really horrible job of dealing with it, right? That
MGM, for example, they did a great job recently. They shut everything down. They lost, however much money you lose a day in a casino, which is more than $10. They chose to lose that. They handled it properly, and I don't hear anybody.
I agree.
I haven't heard anybody say a bad word about them, even though it was a mess.
If people were going on vacation at that time, they may have been upset, but they all got vouchers, I'm sure. The reality is, for the level of impact they had, which was like high, right? Like that incident was bad, right? They discovered the incident and started responding to it before the attackers announced themselves, right? And that's really important, that they were paying attention, right? And they, the attackers came with their demand and they said, "No, we got this, thanks." And that's the A game, right? And everyone can have their version of the A game if they have their plan in place, they have the right insurer, they've got the incident responders teed up, so to speak, right? And pros are dealing with these issues, right?
I appreciate that perspective. I would love, Melanie, talk a little bit about how they're the same and how they're different from a risk transfer perspective, because you said that, and I thought that's really interesting because they are kind of different. Matt, I think that's a great point, that goodwill can be saved if you do your part right. Kind of similar to if there's a fire and you're like, oh shit, there's a fire, and you get the folks there quick. You kind of mitigate some of it. The only difference is in that situation, if you mitigate it by being thoughtful and paying attention, you're just going to get less from the insurance company because there's less damage. Whereas there's certain amounts of goodwill that's like, you're not getting that back. So Melanie, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that because I think it's a really interesting perspective.
It's really hard to put a dollar amount on reputational damage or trust that's lost, as you said, goodwill, trust that's lost with your customers. I mean, once somebody knows you've been compromised,
Chipotle.
you know, it's just like, okay, well, how is that going to affect me? And how do I know it's not going to happen again? And what did they do to, right? What lessons did they learn? What are they doing to prevent that from happening again next time? It really does make a difference. Like you said, how quickly you identify it, how quickly you remediate it. Did you have your disaster recovery plan in place? Was your incident response on point? Did you get a forensics team in there quickly? Like what? And be transparent. I think there's nothing that's going to do more than just being honest and transparent with your stakeholders. And, don't try to just say, oh, we had a cyber incident. I mean, we have to be so careful with our language these days. I know that, but really be transparent with what's going on and what you're doing to prevent that from happening again.
Yeah, we don't use the B word, right? Do you know
No,
that?
we don't. No, we don't. Nope.
So a lot of these things sound like I should know ABC, XYZ. Here's the order of operations. If this, then, which then leads to the question, well, I'm not a lawyer and I don't know all this shit. So what am I? Who do we refer to for experts? And I'm posing this question. I'm going to start with Melanie, but then Matt, I want you to follow up. Who do you recommend you use as a resource for knowing the things that you may not know to do these types of things properly?
Well, that's what we do as an MSP. We partner with our customers and we go in and we serve as we can do a fully managed security, or we can go in and work with our IT and serve as an extension of that. But that's exactly what we do is we go in and we help them with their recovery plans and with their incident response and with the monitoring of the situation and with the employee training so that who does what. Okay, so this is what happens. Who do you contact? Do you even know who you contact first? You put those plans in place. So I do think that in today's day and age, you definitely need to have an expert on your side helping you navigate those waters.
I was hoping that was, go ahead, keep going.
It really makes all the difference. When there is an incident, it makes all the difference in the world, how quickly you detect it, how quickly the team springs into action, how quickly you get those systems isolated. I've seen it firsthand, even just as recently as this year. So
I love that was your answer, and I was hoping it was going to be, because I think it illustrates a beautiful point that you should be as the MSP. You should own that. You are like me. That's what we do. We do that. And if you are an MSP that's watching this, like, I don't know the answers to these questions. I feel uncomfortable. If a customer were to come to me with this right now, like, how the hell would I handle that? I'd have to call Melanie. Like, think about that. If you should have those competencies. Anyway, I'm going to throw it to you, hot potato to Matt now, just on your thoughts with that.
I think we're on the same page here. I think of it from the perspective of trusted advisor, and I think whether you think of it as technology or information or cyber, there needs to be a trusted advisor, in the same reason that organizations need a trusted advisor for law or for accounting. And only the largest organizations really effectively are able to retain the level of professional talent required in-house. And so if you're not, one of those really large organizations, you need to find your trusted advisor outside yourself, right? MSPs are great, if you're looking for a fully managed service, but there's other versions of the technology service provider formula. Shared management. There's other models there, right? But the point is to find that trusted advisor that you can treat just like your accountant, just like your lawyer. And anytime you don't feel fully informed, right, you bring that trusted advisor in, right? And maybe they're providing the solution, or maybe they're just telling you which solution is the right one. But that's critical. We've got some questions here. I'm going to throw this one up on the screen for you, Melanie.
okay.
Itza's here. She's talking about changes.
Are there any requirements you see in the horizons, big changes, requirements to qualify for coverage. Yeah, I do actually. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I think on the application, if you have looked at an insurance policy application lately, they have changed. They are longer. The questions are no longer just, do you have MFA? Yes or no? It's okay. Where do they want to see MFA? Do you have it on your email? Do you have it on remote access to your network or on administrative and privileged access? The questions are really, really getting more specific. And I don't honestly think that a general lines agent fully knows how to guide customers on all the time on what those questions mean. And business owners certainly don't have a clue most of the time on how to fully answer them accurately, but it's so important because if you don't answer them right, you're setting yourself up for misrepresentation or a denial of claim. So, for example, we used to ask a whole bunch of different questions that were really just for, kind of information gathering, like, do you train your employees? Well, now that's changed to you must train your employees because we know, and insurance companies are catching up. They know like 90% of cyber attacks are from human error. So insurers want to know what went wrong and how do we prevent that from happening again. I could give you an example of like your data encryption. It's not just do you encrypt your data, but is it encrypted at rest, in transit, on mobile devices, when it's in the care of a third party. Most recently, I was talking to you guys about this earlier. Most recently, I saw an insurance company that actually has an addendum called the Neglected Software Exploit Endorsement. And it's like AKA patch or no pay. So it all has to do with your patching.
Oh, wow.
If you patch, and it's all based from the first known date of the exploitation. So if you patch within 45 days, you get full coverage. If you wait between 46 and 90 days, your coverage goes down to only 3/4. And if you go into the 91 to 180 day range, it goes down to half coverage. And then you start getting co-insurance penalties added onto it. So I absolutely see more questions and deeper questions being asked because insurance companies want to know, what your risk is. Can they gamble on you? Insurance is kind of a gamble. Can they gamble on you? Do we want to hold it? Do we want to fold it? There's hundreds of actuaries that are helping insurance companies do just that.
I love that.
I mean, there's the long forms, right? And if anyone's never seen a long form, they're probably 200 pages of content that they like somehow squeeze down onto like 40 or 50 pages so that people won't get scared of a 200 page, but like really it's a 200 page interview. And so that's where the questions
like that. They're stacked and it's all Tetris.
That's where the questions start, right? And then they migrate from there to these small business forums. And so if we're just like peeking into the future, that thing Melanie's talking about appeared on the long forms like around 5 years ago. They started getting very specific about those things. And I have been seeing it in the small business forums. The other thing I've been seeing is they really expect small businesses to know what data they have these days, which is totally new. They want to know, like,
no idea.
They want you to have a data inventory. Yeah, they want you to have a data. They want you to know where is your data, what data do you have, like how important it is. Like if you can't answer those questions, you're uninsurable.
I couldn't even keep my own team out of the data I wanted to keep them out of. I know it's funny, but I'm being serious. Go ahead, Melanie. Forgive me.
I think kind of the takeaway is that when you're completing these applications, to do it fully and accurately, you really do need the help of an MSP who understands the technology and the cyber security side of it, and a cyber liability insurance specialist who understands those coverages, because filling out that application accurately is incredibly important.
Yeah. And I want to say, as a small business owner, or even as an MSP, you may be surprised on how the form changes every year. But as a security professional, let me tell you, when they add that question to the questionnaire, that got added to the security frameworks like 10, 15 years ago. So if you're going through the governance processes, even just in a little baby version of it, right? And you're doing some assessments on your service delivery or what's being delivered to you, you're assessing that, you're not going to be surprised about these things.
There are two little things I want to poke on. One, I think I'm going to forget, but the one that I don't think I'm going to forget is I love the way you described risk transfer. It is gambling for the insurance company, because really that's exactly what risk transfer is. It's whether or not your business is going to burn down is a gamble. There is a point whatever percent chance that your business is going to burn down. And the reason you buy insurance is because you're not willing to take that gamble. You can't. So it really quite literally is gambling. And the people that can afford to do it are the people that are able to hedge their investments and hedge, what they buy and how they sell it. And that's what these major insurance organizations do. Is they position themselves to be able to be profitable regardless of whether or not your business burns down, which is why insurance is a relatively necessary evil. But it's exactly as you described it. It is an exercise in gambling and risk transfer, and doing it properly is extremely important. I remembered my second thing as I got through my first one, which I'm excited by. You talked about making sure that you fill out those applications correctly. And the point that I want to make, and I'm going to try to figure out how to pose it as a question instead of just saying it outright. Is it white and black? And if it's correct today, when you fill out the application, what does that mean for tomorrow? And I'm going to start with Melanie because I know Matt's got good answers for that one. I anticipate she does as well, but.
Well, yeah, you have to be, if you have a claim and the insurance company finds out you haven't been doing what you said you were going to do, obviously there's going to be an issue there. That's what the claims examiner job, is to figure that out. So each year.
Let me get that right. So you're telling me that if I hire a company to do security training or phishing training for my team, and then I fire that company now that I've completed my insurance application and we're not doing that training anymore, you mean to tell me that the insurer is not going to let that fly?
No, they're not. That's not the risk that they agreed to insure.
I like the way you said that. It's not the risk they agreed to insure.
Yeah, that's totally true. The real world's complicated, right? If you look at how this actually shakes out in like an arbitration court where like things like this are settled when you disagree, they use a reasonable person test, and they say, would a reasonable person who was not the person filling it out, right? How would they have answered that question? And one of the things you'll see in these questions is that the questions are written with a wide applicability in terms of who's going to be the reader. Are we going to get the right answer most of the time? But when I know, because I'm like this guy, when geeky technologists sit down and they look at the form, they're like, well, that's only 57% true, right? And you're like, how do I answer that? Well, 57% is more than 50, so I'll check yes, right? And actually, you sort of have to do that to get through these forms if you've got a high level of technical knowledge. However, the advice I always give is, despite the fact there may not be enough room on the form, you write it in there and you explain exactly where you're at, right? And add extra pages on the back if you need to. If the underwriter doesn't read the note, that's on them, right? But you make the disclosure.
And I am seeing on applications more spaces for you to write things in, because sometimes it needs more of an explanation. It's not a black or white answer.
No, life almost never is.
And insurers love those answers, by the way. They're like, oh, this person knows exactly how risky they are. That shows a level of maturity that I'm not getting over here. Actually, their risk is lower, right? So even if the answer is, well, we've got this partway deployed, not necessarily a bad thing.
I want to transition into the bad guy topic. Insurers. Melanie, before we went live, you were saying every insurer is an asshat.
That is not what I said. Yes, that is not what I said.
Tell me what you said. I lost it.
She's got friends watching, Zach.
I do. I didn't say that.
She didn't say that. She didn't say asshat.
Zach,
No, I think you said it's hard. It's hard interacting.
No. She said the opposite, actually. That's why I'm trying to give her the ball, Matt.
Zach, you owe me a pizza.
That I could probably arrange.
What I was saying was that I think, contrary to how they are often painted, which you can, I have heard it said, the insurance companies they're just trying to, make as much money and pay as little in claims. And Yes, that is true. But they have to charge a premium commensurate with the risk, or they're a business just like the rest of us. They're in business to make money like the rest of us. They have stakeholders like the rest of us. Okay. So yes, their job is to take money and pay as little as claims, but they're not bad guys. Okay. Their job is to take this historical data and predict future outcomes. And that's challenging with cyber because there's not a lot of historical data. And, I just I've heard many times the insurance companies framed as bad guys, and I don't think that's the case. Bottom line, they have to make money like the rest of us do.
I want
I
to
want to double down on that one note that Melanie said about the data. Like, they don't have the historical data. Not only do they not have the historical data, by the time they do have it, it's bad, because the threat space out in the world keeps changing. It
Mhm.
takes months or even years to get really solid data about what just happened, right?
Right.
And then you're in a totally new world.
That's a
Yep.
great point.
Think about okay, so I used to sell flood insurance, so I love this analogy. Floodplains take hundreds of years to develop and they don't change quickly. So it makes it much easier to predict that risk. The insurance company I worked for was a write your own flood carrier. So if you think of it, cyber, on the other hand, is changing so fast that there's just, like you said, there's not enough historical data to predict that future risk. And top that with the fact that we haven't even had a catastrophic loss. We've had no cyber hurricane yet. So there's no data to protect like what the magnitude of that loss might look like. So I think insurance companies are in a really tough position.
I'm the magnitude of the cyber hurricane is a scary thing that keeps me up at life.
Mm.
At
The real
life, you're
answer
just
is it could take
sleep
everything
early.
out. It could bankrupt every insurance market on the planet, and our whole monetary system is just gone.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen insurance companies go out of business and nobody benefits when that happens. Nobody.
I'd love to draw the juxtaposition of what you're saying. Describing the insurance carriers is like they're trying to make money. I'm gonna let you behind the through the fourth wall of a pizza franchise owner a little bit. So in the same way, the insurer is trying to make money, and there's an elasticity point on how much they give and how much risk they take. There's an elasticity point as a pizza owner on how much you give and how much you take. And the way to describe that is if I just give every customer hundreds and hundreds of pepperonis, the cost of the pizza that goes out the door could be more than the cost of bringing in the pizza. Um, just in the same way, I have to give what you paid for when I give you your pizza. The insurance carrier has an elasticity point on the amount of risk they take and the amount that they pay out when risk happens. And Melanie describing like there are people trying to run businesses too. They have overhead, they have this, they have that. Just because they're the one giving you the check doesn't mean that they don't also have pressures and economic pressures,
That
industry pressures, all sorts of
that's
things.
real. That's real. There was this moment, I think it was about 18 months ago, maybe a little less, when the Lloyd's cyber insurance market ran out of capacity.
I
Um,
remember you talking about this.
yeah,
Yeah.
there was some capacity there, but there wasn't enough to go around. And so, some things you can just make more of a thing, right? This is not one of those things you can just make more of a thing. There wasn't enough capacity in the insurance markets. And so a whole lot of people just got told, sorry, you can't have insurance. The people they targeted were the ones that had the least amount of security. So,
Right. So I agree with you. I don't think they're bad guys either. We're all trying to, if you don't think the local, grocery store isn't a bad guy, your insurance carrier. Now, if your local grocery store guy is kicking cats and whatever, then he might be a bad guy. And same is possible for insurance carriers, but not because of their profession. And I think that's a really important thing to point out, and a really great point that Melanie had, because it's really easy to see them as the bad guy. And really, we just need to figure out the right way to work with them and then understand the process so that you can have success in the space and it can work out. All right. So there's one more topic. So I think we've got 10 minutes left here. We can save the last 5 for you telling us a little bit about your organization and some takeaways. But let's talk about like high level MSP challenges. We've hit all the other sides. We hit small business. We hit the cyber insurance side. We talked a little bit about MSPs and the challenges surrounding this, but let's cover them.
Well, two of the biggest challenges that I encounter are just with the belief systems that the small business owners have. One I hear all the time is, so one of the things we do is, we go in and we look at our existing customers. We start out as a break fix shop, for example, and, we've changed with the times, and we're trying really hard to educate our customers on what the risk is. And what I hear is, oh, I'm too small to be on a criminal's radar, or cybercrime doesn't happen in my small town, USA. I actually had an insurance agent tell me that he wanted to get into selling cyber liability, but he knew he needed to have it on his business, but cybercrime didn't happen in his small town, USA. And I just thought, wow.
They're not knocking door to door, these guys.
Oh gosh. So, you guys mentioned MGM and Caesars. We hear about the big things on the news, but only hearing those big stories really just perpetuates the false narrative that, I'm too small.
Mm-hmm.
And, the truth is you're not too small to be hacked. There's no such thing as a, cyber criminal who cares about, how big you are. They're casting those nets and just seeing who they can capture. So you're not too small to be hacked. You're just too small to make the news. You're just not sensationalized enough. You're not MGM and Caesars. You're a mom and pop shop down the street. And that's really, really sad because, we have a heart for small business. Zach, I know you and I both do. So when small business gets taken down by the cyber criminals, it hurts my heart, and it's not okay. And a lot of times, go ahead.
I want to add one piece to that because it's not just the cyber. I mean, they're all cyber criminals, right? But when we think cyber criminals, we think like Russian flags and like, you know what I mean? But the reality is, your mom and pop shop might have fired the wrong kid, who is then going to go and steal grandma's password and make, cause problems to your business. And it may not be the same as, millions of dollars worth of data stolen, but, being locked out of your or having whatever things happen in your business that could result in stoppage of service or, failing accounts, or not even like, if somebody were to hack my email and I all of a sudden didn't get driver applications that I needed to get to be able to improve my business's efficiency, that would have fucked my business up. And it would have been like really minor thing that Russia didn't have to do, but it still would have impacted my business. And I guess the point that I'm just trying to throw in there to caveat to what you're saying is small town cyber USA doesn't exist. It could be Russia as a part of like just basic. Or it could be your next door neighbor that, hates that your dog barks at night, or it could be your pissed off employee or any other thing. So it's not just the high level attackers we have to be considered.
Law enforcement's been going through this change right now where they're starting to not treat cyber crimes as cyber crimes. What they're starting to do is bring cyber into all of the other criminal practices. All the other law enforcement practices, because there are some very important people in the world of law enforcement that are saying all crimes are cyber crimes. Like, there's not a crime you can think of that didn't involve a body camera or a credit card or a phone or a computer or a
car with a computer in it.
Yeah, they're all cyber crimes, right? And from an insurance perspective, they are happy to draw a line and say, like, this part of the angle of that protecting this business is cyber, and you need to protect it the same way you'd protect with a sprinkler system or door locks, right, or an alarm system.
You were saying great points, and I interrupted you, Melanie. So keep going.
Well, just for a small business, I think it's like 94%, don't quote me, but a really high percentage is delivered through email. So, I mean, just think about a business email compromise. And, were your employees trained? Go back to the employee training. Were they trained to understand what that was? Are they trained not to click on links or to look at the address and to try to recognize how a business email compromise could come through? Because human fallacy, we're not perfect, and criminals exploit our humanness. And so, It doesn't even have to be, someone physically hacking into your computers, just the invoice manipulation or the criminals get into your system. Sometimes it takes like on average 120 days to even know that you've been compromised. And during that 120 days, the criminals aren't necessarily in there dropping payloads during that time. They're sitting there getting the lay of the land and waiting and watching and doing recon work so that at the appropriate time, they can imitate you. They can pretend that there's someone in authority. They can ask you to change your payment and send your, invoice to a different bank account and a different routing number. And you believe it because you think it's, your boss telling you to do it. That I hear insurance stories. My insurance colleagues tell me stories about business email compromise, invoice manipulation every day. Like it's just happening so often.
Well, should we do final thoughts and a little plug here and make our way?
Sure.
Matt, I'm asking that question to you, but I think Melanie shook her head yes.
The days, the weeks.
That is
I'm already out. I'm already in the weekend. Is what's happening.
Well, give us a quick takeaway, Matt. I'll give a quick takeaway, and then Melanie can do a takeaway and her plug, and then we'll all high five.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting a small business in a safe place from cyber, which is all crime, right? Could be perpetuated from anywhere on the planet. You can be a target. You need that help with that trusted advisor. You need the internal business stakeholders to decide how much risk that they're willing to retain. And they need to work with their service provider and their insurer to get to the right place. And it takes all those ingredients.
I think my takeaway is just it's applicable to everything you're doing, and everybody has to be involved at some level in considering your cybersecurity. I'd always love to talk more about governing and like considering it across your whole business as a part of process, but everybody having some consideration of cyber is probably my takeaway from this one. Melanie, you're up.
I'd say my takeaways, I kind of mentioned them earlier, just that you need proactive security, you need reactive insurance, but you really do need the help of the expert, your MSP or your cyber liability agent, someone who's specializing in those fields to bring that expertise to, this crazy, rapidly changing, environment. And let's see, as far as a plug, IT ArchiTeks is a managed service provider with a security first mindset. We offer fully managed IT and co-managed cybersecurity services to SMBs with a specific, we didn't actually talk about this, but our specific focus is in the transportation industry. Over the past 20 years, our team has just protected really from every angle of a cyber attack. We've been called in to lead recovery efforts after. We've been engaged to navigate through and gain control right in the midst of. And we've even successfully defended against avoiding them altogether. And 1, 2, 3, which one would you want to be? You can pay a little bit now to invest in cybersecurity, or you can pay the bad guys later to try to recover from it and get your information back. So,
well, I completely have had a blast having you on. I think that what you bring to the table in the industry is absolutely needed. We didn't talk about your 3 boys, but football, basketball, and baseball were the things that I enjoyed to do. So hopefully you have some fun activities lined up related to some of those over the weekend. Go Mavs, but I'm a Steelers fan, so I kind of hope your Saints just take it easy. And this
I
was
got
great.
one more
Thank
thing here.
Hit it. Tell us.
This is critical.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, absolutely critical. All right. Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you for joining us for another MSP Cyber Roundtable. Next week, we're going to have Brian Gillette on again. We cannot wait for a conversation about finding all the prospects in your target market. So a little market saturation conversation. A lot of fun there. Thank you so much. If this is your first time joining us, make sure to check out our educational YouTube library and like us on LinkedIn. Happy weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.